It's your guy, Ron Graham, your senior benefits consultant. This is a special that goes out to my good, solid friends in the private industry sector, guys and girls that I know who have done a very great job starting their businesses and are starting really to build up in their businesses and are setting themselves up for some great things coming up. And again, just kudos out to you guys. I also don't want to forget about my W-2 friends, my old Bell Atlantic Verizon buddies, and my good friends out in the railroad industry. So I want to really give you guys something solid today. I think that it's going to be something that we all probably have thought of, but maybe didn't quite understand. That's right. Today's episode is the top four. Once again, the top four myth busters surrounding retirement. Stay tuned. We're going to get in it in 1 second. Let's dive in. What are the top four retirement myths and who will this conversation help the most? Well, a couple of groups of people that I'm very close to. I'll start out from the top and I'll work my way down. And we're going to start out with those people who are running the show, who have their own companies, their own small businesses, and they're doing pretty doggone well for themselves. And you guys know who you are. And so I'm speaking to you because there are a lot of things in these myths that you really need to know and understand, especially in your situations. Also, for those 1099 buddies of mine and coworkers of mine, I'm also a 1099 person, so I'm speaking to myself. And so what that means is that we have to look at things very, very differently. And we have to be very, very strategic. And we have to have a little bit more ownership, just like my small business owners. And then, of course, last but not least, my colleagues, my former colleagues, a lot of you all who are still very close in touch with, my W4, W2 world. In other words, we work for a corporation. And of course, we'll start with that. When we look at these top four myths, when you first start working for a corporation, the first thing they do is they encourage you to take on a lot of these little packages that come with various, benefits, anywhere from 401k, you may have a pension, some form of life insurance or something like that. Sometimes sickness benefits, it really depends. But if you were like me, young and very willy-nilly and irresponsible, you probably just thumbed through those pages. You might have signed off on some of them and you didn't. And so if you were like me, you didn't really start thinking about things until probably you got well into like your 30s and you started having children. Yes, those specialized matters of life who get you to start to realize there's something else more important than me, yourself. You guys know what I'm talking about. And so you begin to realize and think about your future. You begin to think about, well, who's going to take care of these people? So that's kind of like when things got serious for me. The only downside to that is I probably blew 12, 13 years. You know what I mean? So because, you figure that, oh, you have time. And so I do want to talk about that. So myth number one, a pension will do. A pension will do it. And so, will the pension do it? Well, first of all, we have to address the fact of the elephant in the room, as we say. How many companies do you know still have pensions? I mean, yes, we have state employees, we have city employees in certain corporations, and they do. So we will say that they have not completely gone away. But when you look at the majority of people, because we know that what small business literally runs America. And that means that most people are working outside of government and state affiliates. And that means that the majority of the people probably won't have pensions. Now, we do know why that happened. I'll give you a brief synopsis. If you know companies, corporations like General Motors, of course, the post office, and companies like that. And what really went wrong there was that, well, I don't know if you want to call it going wrong or going right, depending on where you stand on the matter, but most people in today's society are living far more longer than they did, let's say 20, 25 years ago. And so what that means is that most of these companies, unfortunately, or fortunately, however they look at it, were banking on the fact that you and I would not live past 10 years in retirement. And so, because of that, it was very easy to coexist with a world where you're paying out benefits to former employees as well as current employees who are still on the books. And so that world worked for a while. But now, when you have people living 15, 20, 25 years and beyond, well into retirement, it can cause and it has caused problems with some of these corporations. And that's why now they've just got away with them all together. And so my point to you guys is that yes, whereas the pension uh, does sound like it could have been something special, and we do know some people that still have it, not necessarily the case that it's effective today. When you look at your pension, for those of you that are privy to know what this is, you have to understand that everything comes with a calculation. So it's never going to be dollar for dollar, match for match. In other words, if you making, if you see down here in the bottom of my screen, if you work for 30 years, and again, chances are in our generation, I don't know about the old, well, I do know the old generation, but in our generation, how many people work somewhere for 30 years? You know what I mean? Like that's like the last of the Mohicans as far as I'm concerned, because most people, the way these corporations are wired, will only work an average of about 5, maybe to 10 years before there's some kind of a corporate takeover or transition or downturning or some kind of economy, whatever the case is. And so people, $45,000 a year. And there is myth buster number one. You see, you're living off of 75,000. And now with the pension, they're telling you, oh, well, you're going to get $45,000 for the rest of your life. Well, that sounds good if your expenses are $45,000 expenses. And what we've learned is that while people are living longer, unfortunately, it's allowing for people to whose expenses to travel well into their retirement years as well. Case in point, the average person who gets serious about their lives, like I mentioned earlier, and you say at the age of 30, 35, you decide, I want to get serious and now I want to go and buy a home. And so you do that. You go out and invest in a home, and then you have a family, and you might even invest in some kind of a vacation home, something that, just to get out with the kids. And so now you're looking at a person who's 35 years old, has a 30-year mortgage. So you do the math, 30 and 35, that's 75. And God forbid they move, because if they move and buy another house, it starts the clock all over again. And I can tell you what, that's how most of us do, right? And so then you have, the vacation home, whatever that is, 20 years on that. And so you kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. Someone like that most likely will be in retirement zone, 62, 65, 66, still paying mortgages. Maybe the car is paid off. I don't know. But most people would have to have a reliable car, because if they're working still to pay bills, that means they still have to have a pretty reliable car. So it's not like you could just get a little old hoopty, as we say, just to take you up the street and back to the grocery store or to the bingo hall, or, well, let me stop. Oh, good old Social Security. Social Security will do it for me. It'll help me. It'll provide for me. It'll give me what I need. Social Security. Well, that's also a formula. And that formula says there's an average index of monthly earnings that they look at over a 35-year history of work. So as I mentioned earlier, now we're talking to my guys and girls who run their own companies, and my guys and girls who are in 1099 space. Well, you got to also know that you guys aren't taking out FICA and different things, because it's up to you to provide that well as a means for yourself. So just keep that in mind. But also, for those who are looking at Social Security, if you've worked at least 40 quarters, which is otherwise known as 10 years at a 40-hour work week, then everyone is eligible for Social Security. And so you see here some averages, and these are averages based and weighted on people in a certain age bracket. Obviously, if you were born after 1960, 1961, your retirement age would be 67 years of age. But for the sake of this display, I went with the people born before 1960. But you can see a typical income of 60,000, 70,000. And the reason why these salaries are here is because this is kind of realistically where middle America is. I mean, anybody making over these, 70, 80, 90,000, they really are in a pretty good income bracket. But even still, pay attention to the way it breaks it down. So, when they do the primary insurance amount, the PIA, and they do these formulas, and they come up with these various formulas. And I encourage all of you, all of my people on this call, please go to the socialsecurity.gov website and calculate. They have a calculator where you can come up with your own numbers. Now, these numbers I came up with because these are the general salaries that most people that I know fall into. So that's why I use this in the W-2 world. And I did not account for overtime. So I know my buddies out there on the railroad, I did not count for overtime because we all know overtime is not money we can trust and count on for the long haul. So I'm looking at basic, 40-hour week salaries. So anyway, with that disclaimer being said, you can see you're looking at roughly about 40, what is that? 60,000, 70,000, 80,000. So, I mean, look at these numbers. Just like I said on the previous slide, when I mentioned to you that someone making 75 grand would be probably doing somewhere about 45,000 a year. And let's just take one of these numbers down here, 45,000 a year. Let's take 2334. And let's see, let's multiply that by 12, okay? And the only reason why I'm saying that is because I'm just trying to give you an example of what an annual salary looks like. So that's 28,000 a year on Social Security. Who can live off of that? $28,000 a year when you were making 90,000 bucks. Are you kidding me? So you're making $90,000 a year. Forgive me, guys, for laughing. If you don't laugh at this stuff, you'll cry, right? But 80,000 a year. Now I'm living off of 2334 a month or 2220 a month. I mean, come on. That's no money. And even if you added that, to the 45,000, you're still, well, you're closer. So if you're fortunate to have a job where you have Social Security and a pension, you just might be able to make it, right? Because when I added the 45,000 from the previous slide to this 28,000, it comes up to 7308. Okay, but you get the idea. You're still running up a little bit short. Now, we won't beat a dead horse with Social Security because the other one we want to talk about is the 401k. We want to talk about 401k because this is the one that flies around very aggressively, right? You must take the 401k. You must have it. It is critical for your retirement. And so there's two realities. Now, you have some companies that match the employees' benefit, and you have a lot of companies that don't. All right, so there's your other myth buster. The 401k is the way. The 401k is the way. Well, is it? I don't know. Let's remember now, we're talking about a stock. All right, so unlike a pension, see, a pension can't go away. A pension is not playing around. Although there's influences by the market, but the market does not control the pension. So at least with a pension, you pretty much can set your clock to that. You also can set your clock to Social Security. You cannot set your clock to a 401k that has market volatility in it. You just can't do it because you'd be setting yourself up for failure. And that's the myth. Now, I know that's against the grain, but that's what we do on this channel. We talk about everything. We lay it on the line because remember, in senior benefits, it's very important for us to talk about the things they don't talk about, because this is why most of us end up in a very uncomfortable scenario when we're preparing to retire, because when we go to look at what we've done and what we believed we've saved, we begin to realize it's not enough. And so the amount of cash that's funded when you retire, you see, there's no, like, unlike a pension, there's no guarantee. That's why you see people back in '08 looking at their stocks like, oh my God, what's going on? And then you hear people say, well, don't worry, stocks are bad. Hang in there, just keep buying, buy it low and sell it high. But you remember now, this is not the stock as we know it. This is not day trading and options trading. This is not those things. Because if it was, that person was be more savvy and more able to manipulate things a little bit different. We're talking about the average employee who goes to work every week, barely looks at these numbers, probably only look at it when they hear the stock market's crashing, and the poor soul is looking in there seeing the money just die, 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 die. And what are they doing at that point? The panic signs are going, because they realize this is my retirement. I can't play the market forever, right? And so depending on what you get out of that, let's be honest, right? Now, I got the 2018 tax brackets up here, but make no mistake, if you make 12%, of the income, 10%, this is your tax bracket. 10% for 9,500, 12%. So for all my big money earners that say I got over 200 grand in this 401k, make no mistake, 35% of this income is going to be taxed. You see, 401k preaches that it's a tax shelter, which it is during your retirement years. But here's the downside to that. When you retire and they take all those taxes out, the timing of that is not good, because that's the time of your year where you're on your downside, where you're not able to make it back up, where you're not able to write off a certain type of way. Because remember, and these are the two groups that I spoke to before, primarily business owners and 1099. Well, you're writing off all along the way. But a W-2 person is not. This is a tax deferred for them through their working years. And then when they retire, well, what are they writing off? There's really nothing to write off, which means that they're going to take the bulk of your savings. And make no mistake, you're going to get that, 20%. They're going to take that 20% from you straight up. Remember, these numbers are, this is your basic federal here. But they're going to take that 20%, and you can check. You go to the 401k site, whoever you're with, you'll ask them if I want to do a withdrawal for retirement. First thing they're going to say is, well, are you 59 and a half? Of course you're not. So at that point, you shouldn't be. You'll be fined from that 10% penalty, but you will take the 20% withdrawal. And then they'll throw this number back into your annual. And their annual will throw it in, and annually they'll charge you whatever tax is that you made for that year, like a regular tax return that you paid all your life. So unfortunately, he giveth and he taketh away. And that's the problem. The time that they take this money back from you is the worst timing in the world. I don't need you taking money back from me when I can't work overtime anymore, or when I can't physically hustle and work part-time or off the books or whatever I need to do. I'm not physically in a position to do that anymore. So now these taxes are absolutely killing me, right? So remember, guys and gals, the timing of these taxes are not good in the 401k world. And yes, don't let any financial advisor tell you anything different. You will pay taxes on this money. They don't care whether you're retired. They don't care how old you are. You're paying it. And if you don't do it by the age of 70, because you have some people that try to keep the money in so they don't have to pay the taxes, trust me, at 70, you got to take it out no matter what. Okay? So that's that. The second thing, I don't want to keep going on too far, but the last myth is Medicare. Oh, my medical needs will be handled. I have Medicare. I'll get Medicare. Medicare will take care of me. Well, It's kind of like true, but that's a myth also. You see, the average Medicare plan still has out-of-pocket expenses. Now, Medicare does cover the majority and the bulk of your medical needs. Okay, it does. All right. However, make no mistake, there are out-of-pocket expenses associated with Medicare. Now, I don't have enough time to go into all of that right now, but obviously we can talk about that in a one-on-one setting. But for now, all you need to understand is that there are Medicare expenses associated with being on Medicare. And what people don't understand is because of that, you have to have certain settings in place, structure in place to offset these Medicare costs down the road. You need that. There's certain sicknesses and illnesses that can absolutely cost you catastrophically money out of your pocket, almost to the point where it could put you in a situation where you got to hopefully apply for like social service benefits. I've seen it. It happens. As a matter of fact, it's happening right now to my own mother. So this stuff that we're talking here on this podcast is real talk. This is not, I'm not making this stuff up. Guys, it's serious out here. These are myths because I believe these myths. Pension, well, didn't have that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, Social Security will do that. Then I found out, well, it's not as much as I thought it was going to be. Oh, yeah. 401k. Yeah, that would do it. Oh, yeah. Oh, I got to pay all these taxes on it. Oh, yeah. And Medicare will take care of me, or I can stay on my job Medicare benefits. Well, some of us can. But the same people who can stay on their job's medical plan are the same people who absolutely are getting a pension. But here's the kicker. How many of us are still in those categories? So we realize that America is primarily run by small business, medium to small businesses, which means that most people are outside that bubble. And so those costs will absolutely be incurred by the actual client. And one more thing to hang on you, and I don't like doing this, but again, we have to bust it up. 1 out of 5 Americans are struggling with medical debt. 1 out of 5. It's a lot. Millions and millions of people out there right now that can't even pay their medical costs, and it bankrupts, because one thing about medical expenses, unlike others, and for those of you who know, outside of that, you have taxes, student loan, and medical expenses. Those are the only expenses that hardly ever go away. It takes like hell and high water to get those things off your credit, hell and high water to get from out of paying them. You have to almost be literally dead with a pulse only, barely having a pulse, to get out of your medical responsibilities. So please, please, please understand, this information is absolutely real talk. So what's the conclusion? We showed you some things on the other side. We showed you some of the monies that you can get from a pension. We've showed you some of the monies that you can potentially recuperate from Social Security. We've also showed you some of the monies that you get from a 401k. But keep in mind that the household expenses, even still today, are running somewhere around $5,500 a month, meaning that the average spending per year is roughly around $66,000. Okay. Now, you probably say, well, when I retire, will these numbers go away? But remember what I mentioned earlier. When you buy a house in your 30s, buy another one, sell that one because it's too small, family grew, flip that, get another one. Now you got another house, and 99% of the time when you sell a house in that short period of time, you're not really getting enough money to pay off a house in its entirety. So you just basically have all the money needed as down payment and proceeds to get into the next house, which means that your household expenses will filter well into your retirement years. And so some of us who have kids living with us, there's a lot of expenditures there because a lot of parents are holding down their kids as they go through college and different things like that. And so what's happening is that you're realizing that the household expenses, and we're not even talking about inflation, keeps people in a situation that if one little thing goes wrong, one little thing goes a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, that's it. The whole system literally collapses like dominoes, man. It's crazy. And so what happens is that the myth is that there's going to be this money that's there when I retire, and I'll be able to navigate through these things. And so I'm bringing this to a close because I don't want to continue to talk things that I think can actually depress you after a while, right? Like when you really think about this, you're like, this is depressing. What kind of interview is this? What kind of, podcast is this? But all jokes aside, it is something that you have to think about, guys and girls. You have to give it thought, because the reality is that these numbers are not really going down. They're actually going up, and they're getting worse by the day. So please, please, please take advantage of the various programs that are out there for you to navigate on your own. And so I have things that we can talk about. There are a lot of very inexpensive products out there that will offset the challenges that these present to us now. And so we're not going to wait for matters to happen. We're not going to wait for the inevitable to go wrong. We're going to act now. We're going to act responsibly. So get with me. I am your consult, Ron Graham. My pleasure being with you today. Always enjoy talking senior benefits, man. I really do enjoy talking senior benefits with you.